Due to some real-life circumstances, I have elected to split this video into Chapter 3 this week and Extra next week. My new series, A Vault a Day Build Phase, will start in 2 weeks because I've decided to build my own personal server and want to host the instance on that despite being a single-player series. This will enable me to farm resources while offline and should provide a better experience for you all as well. With that, let's crack on with Create Above and Beyond Chapter 3. I hope you enjoy. Anyway, that's the recipe for Chapter 2A. Which brings us to the bear that is Chapter 3. And honestly, I'm not 100% sure where I want to start Chapter 3. I think well, the only way to begin is by beginning, and I think we want to begin not with the Crusher. Let's do that later. I think we want to start with Slimy Fern duplication. So, Slimy Ferns, you gotta go into the overworld for this and explore. And they'll just be around Tinker's Construct trees with slimy blocks and the like. And there is some arcane magic. You will also need demon fruits to make these arcane fires or whatever. I put them on Netherrack just in case, because Netherrack has a property where fires don't go out on them. So I don't know if that's necessary or if you can just light it up wherever you want, but I took that precaution because it's a pain in the butt to set up. So, in order to make this stuff, and you can see also that we have the various different items that we output here hooked up to redstone links and stockpile switches down the road. The thing you need to know about Slimy Ferns is that you can cut them on a cutting board. Or in the case of this, I think, how are we splitting this? With a knife in these deployers. Now, unfortunately, I think only one of the 3 knives that I have here is actually unbreaking. So at some point in time, I could potentially run out, but Iron Knife has a lot of durability. So, deployer, or Slimy Fern, deployer. A deployer cuts Slimy Fern in half. Half of Slimy Fern gets split by andesite tunnel. Now the nice thing about using an andesite tunnel for this is that it automatically, I believe, splits itself as long as you've got, just one item at a time. And because of how... actually, I'm not entirely sure. This might be 2 Slimy Ferns, potentially. And if so, it'll split one out to the side and one out into the crushing wheels. The one that goes off to the side goes into chest, which immediately gets deployed into this arcane fire, and then that regenerates into a whole fern. However, you need to be able to pick that up. So one way you could theoretically do it is using like a create fan to push the item out of the arcane fire. But that is big, and if you have access to vacuumlators, what you can do is just put a filter on your vacuumlator so that it picks up the specific full fern that you want. And then we're also using brass item pipes because by the end of Chapter 2, you should be able to make brass pretty routinely. And so you get these brass item pipes, and we'll just pump them directly back into the storage drawer from whence it came. Now, the way that I'm doing this, I don't need bone meal creating dyes later, so these blue Slimy Ferns are just decorative, kind of. We don't actually need them in the factory, we're just reducing them in case we want them later for whatever reason. So I kind of short-circuited that part of the chapter. We'll just pull up the chapter. It looks very similar to my graph. But blue Slimy Fern gets cooked into bone meal. Bone meal is typically used for flowers, but because this can be any dye color, that's why I'm using cactus, and we'll get there when we get there. So that is why blue Slimy Fern just terminates in a chest and otherwise still has its loop, because we want to get a lot of blue Slimy Fern. But the other 2 go into grindstones. The grindstones make the green Slimy Fern and the purple Slimy Fern into, I think this is good, no, hold on. Yeah, it gets cooked, or it gets ground into mush, and then it gets cooked on these grills into 2 different things. Not grills, stoves. Now, stoves, you can't just use funnels to put into them, you have to use deployers. But but they're also really nice for other purposes that we can talk about if anybody's interested in. But in order to cook up stuff, you put onto stove, and unfortunately, when it's done cooking, it pops off. So you need more vacuumators to pick up. And these vacuumators, once again, also have filters. The green slimy dust gets cooked into gunpowder, and the purple slimy dust gets cooked into ender dust or something like that. I don't remember the exact name for this, so don't quote me on it. But that fulfills several steps in the Create Above and Beyond chapter chart. Let's see. So that's Slimy Ferns. I think we should probably talk about gunpowder and TNT next. So, we have our gunpowder. We have our sand from chapter 1. And this is also kind of why I built the chapters in this particular order. I knew if I did them in an L shape, there were some adjacency benefits that I could get. And so, like, pumping sand through to chapter 3 from chapter 1 becomes really easy if I put the sand in the corner. That was intentional. And so, we have the 5 gunpowder. I think it's 5 gunpowder, yep. We also have the sand. And you'll also notice that we are outputting both white and orange sand, because either will suffice. TNT recipe accepts any forged sand, if memory serves, which is why we also have these filters here, to just specify that we accept multiple types of sand. Mechanical arm grabs from both of these depots, puts into each of these slots, and because they're all pointed, you know, down into this direction, TNT outputs here. Now this is fairly slow. I think I just, you know, low RPM'd this stuff, so I think it's running at 16, maybe 32 RPMs, which means that to make one TNT is really slow. But we have stockpile switch hooked up to our TNT chest, and that's all good. This is the part where we skip over a little bit, and I think we skip over to crushing wheels. Crushing wheels are made from cobblestone and sticks. You'd think that's relatively trivial, and you'd be right. So we've got cobblestone generator over here. It's basically the same as what we had earlier, just a slightly different layout. And of course, we also have it hooked up to a different stockpile switch. Then, this is just so that we can get some doubling in here. And we're just passing the cobblestone under this. And because we have all of our outer ring connected using the wrench, we can just input the cobblestone here and all of the slots will automatically fill up. Same thing with the sticks here. We have it, you know, sort of in a plus sign in the center here, so if we were to put the funnel on any of these, then it would just work. Acacia Tree Farm decided to be cute, and instead of using a linear chassis, just acacia log and a whole lot of slime, or not slime, super glue. And because I'm in slime chunks, it was trivial to make more super glue, especially after I made my plate and ingot maker back there. So acacia comes out, gets processed in the usual way. Right now, I'm just using the sticks that naturally form from breaking acacia, which is a bit of a bottleneck. If I really want to, I could process these into more sticks, and that would make it faster, but I don't care to. So, machine makes crushing wheel. Like I said, 64 RPM, currently off because stockpile switch is full, but this makes crushing wheels, which gets put into here. Then we start getting into the more complicated stuff. We get our initial singularity, which what happens when you put a crushing wheel through crushing wheels. So that's fairly simple. I have this interesting setup here because we need our clutches on both sides, I believe, to shut off this machine. And also, I put the gears in like this so that we got double the speed. So I believe this is running at 32 RPM. Or it would if it was on. And so that means these still spin in the correct direction, but because we're taking our input rotation speed from over here instead of like here using a couple of gear shaft or gearboxes, then we need these gear setups as well to reverse the speed, or to reverse it so that they're spinning in the right direction. But that makes the initial singularity. Now we get into the fun stuff, the quantum singularities. These are made by combining these types of singularities with the ender dust in a TNT blast chamber. Now, your initial thought might be to surround everything with obsidian. This does not do that. What it does do, however, is some intricate timings and a whole lot of redstone linkages. So, we have redstone link that governs whether or not we have any end dust in this chest. We have another redstone link over here that governs our basic singularities. And if either of these is off, it turns off this timer, which, triggers our TNT detonation sequence. And that timer is also hooked up to a stockpile switch that I believe is just monitoring the entangled singularities that we have in there. But let's talk about how we're dispensing these things. We have a chute. Chutes can, if there is no inventory below, just transfer an item and drop it into open space. It's just more smart about that stuff than funnels typically are. But we have chute. We also have funnel here set to output 54 singularity, and funnel here set to output 54 ender dust. And because we have the chute here, that prevents an issue that I was having where I think the items were just kind of flying across and not actually going into the reaction chamber, and that was bad. Now, this is why it is a really good thing that we have access to free cam. Oh. Sticky keys! Why? Why would sticky keys... So, sticky keys issue aside, those 54 of each items come into this blast chamber, which is water-based. Now, I found out the hard way that if you put water, you can't just have, like, a funnel down here to collect the items. So, the reason is, I think because of vanilla water mechanics. The items were basically just bobbing up instead of, sinking down to the bottom, which is what they do since 1.13, I think. And so, I needed an alternate collection method. But anyway, so, when those items get dispensed, they go into the blast chamber with the water. They also only dispense when, A, we need more stockpile in the stockpile switch, which currently we're full, so that's why the timer isn't going. And it also, again, only goes off when we have the correct amount of either material to use in the reaction. Then, when this goes off, this will disable... Hold on. Yes, this will disable from these here. It will disable the funnel, and because this is set to 2 ticks, I think, that'll disable the funnel just long enough to dispense 1 stack of 54 here and here. Then, it will also trigger the dispenser that is full of TNT here, and it will trigger it exactly once, because we have this down here. That will explode after a little bit, and because we have this on a timer input, that means that when this needs more, it won't immediately fire. It will take like 30 seconds or however long I set this to fire, and then we'll get a whole bunch all at once. And the reason I had to put this on a timer block is because it was originally just firing in a loop. Like, it was too fast. And the pipes are not sped up yet, so there's a certain minimum delay that I need to wait before enough items come in here to trigger the stockpile switch. And moreover, entangled singularities, their stack sizes too, but because of something to do with NBT data, I'm guessing the stockpile switch still expects that they can go up to 64. I think it's an improper coding thing with either AE2 or Create, not sure which. But the thing is, this stockpile switch is basically set off to go, if this thing is higher than 1%, immediately shut off. And I think the maximum that this chest gets when it is full is 3%. So there's just an issue where, despite the chest being full, this is nowhere near full capacity. Anyway, so we have 3 vacuulators that are set to filter out only on entangled singularities. So those will store up to a maximum of, I want to say, 45? No. Maybe 15? Yeah, okay. I think each of these has enough inventory for 5x3 or 15 entangled pairs. So we have a total storage of 45 there. And naturally, we also have enough storage for 9x6, which is where we get that 54 number from. And so if this accidentally does trigger twice, then chances are the factory is currently using the entangled singularities, and that means that even though we might trigger this a second time, we will have enough space to put them in here when they're done. Moving along, we now have our chromatic singularities. Chromatic singularities, as I said earlier, require a specific type of colorful dye other than white, because they didn't want you just reusing bone meal. What they've failed to internalize is that cactus. I've just made a vanilla cactus farm here, very similar to the one on basement floor 2. Vacuulators to pick up the cacti. And then into crushing wheel, which originally I had as a blast cooker, I think, to cook green dye that way, but when I realized that you can just run cactus... Oh, that's bad. Sometimes this happens, I do not know why, but sometimes a cactus will get through. So we need to go fix that right now. But while we're talking about that, crushing wheels also turn cactus into green dye. Very effective. Boop. And if I do this right, I can just basketball that in there, and that should eventually get sucked up, yeah, by the vacuumlator. So, for some reason, potentially because there's a hole right here, I think, there is a random chance that a cactus can get into our conveyor belt down below. But otherwise, we have this nice stockpile switch that I believe also governs whether or not this dispenses and whether these crushing wheels are on. And also governs whether or not we're actually using our chromatic singularity mixer, which is entangled singularity plus dye in a basin, crushed. And so we've got a couple of things just to ensure that the chromatic singularities don't occupy all of the inventory slots. And so that way, you know, we've got a sufficient amount of dye in there that we can just keep going with. Those, of course, go into chest. Oop. And actually, I'm going to be right back. For you, it's just going to be a cut. For me, it's going to be editing. Okay, I am back. I just had to take care of some things, and now I have dinner and tea. And the tea is going to be really nice because I can feel my voice starting to hate me from talking so long. So, we were at Chromatic... oh, that's bad. Okay, see, this is a problem with living in slime chunks, is that slime is in the system. I think it's not really a problem because we have the recipe filter set, and as long as a full stack doesn't accumulate, I think we're okay. But anyway, so let me get myself back to center again. Might need to fix that at some point, but it's not right now. So, back into FreeCam. Chromatic Singularity. This is where we start getting into paintballs. Now, this seemed clever when I originally came up with it, but then I realized that I accidentally bottlenecked some of the process, and there is a different loop that I'm probably going to make later. But as far as using these item drains effectively, I thought this was okay at the time. In retrospect, what I really should have done was, like, probably put... let me describe what I did, and then I'll describe what I should do differently. So, right now, you need to get to purple or magenta? Magenta Paintball. Magenta Paintball is one of the random potential outputs from crushing this chromatic singularity. And it's supposed to be a whole Colors of the Rainbow thing. Oh, starting to get hungry. Let me just eat via remote control. Ah. Okay, note to self, don't ever, do that. Okay, good. So that was just a client-side issue, and I think it might potentially be because I was standing close enough that I could have opened one of these chests with my inventory, but anyway. So, we're just not going to risk that again. We're going to fly back over here. So, you need to get to Magenta. If you put these paintballs through the correct number of draining steps, you produce chromatic waste, which is being pumped into nullifiers down here. Nullifiers can accept both items and fluids, despite, their inventory GUI seeming to only indicate items. You can drain these paintballs a certain number of times and end up at Magenta, or like I said, you can just get lucky. The problem is, this outputs anything, red, yellow, green, blue, and magenta. So you can get any of those 5 colors, and if you overcorrect, you get a black paintball or an inert paintball. I forget what they call it, but it's utterly useless for your factory. And so, you need to adjust and drain the specific number of steps in order to get magenta. I did it by splitting out a paintball at each color. So as you can see, we've got red, yellow gets split out here, then green, then blue, and magenta is just the end game. Unfortunately, what this ends up resulting in is that you get a backup. The higher a color is, like red, for example, this will start to back up with a ton of red paintballs because it has to wait for this entire queue to clear out and then drain one, and then at that point in time, one of the earlier steps, like yellow here, is going to potentially bottleneck it by, getting the win in a race condition here, or update order. I'm not sure which it is, really. So, in future, what I'm planning on doing is having, having these tunnels all connected, I think. And then they'll all just split out every other color except magenta, which will, still go out this way. But then I can immediately dump them into item drains. And then the results, whatever comes out, just cycles back in here. And I could potentially put, another set of tunnels here so that I output magenta this way and, save some time and also inventory space over here. But then the rest would still flow back in, and by parallelizing that process, it doesn't really matter what color is in the queue. Any color can go to any item drain, unlike what I'm currently doing, which, well, you can see there's clearly a bottleneck, and we're not getting them as potentially fast as we could be if we parallelized it a little bit more. So that's potentially a future design consideration. But the next step after Magenta Paintball is making Chromatic Compound. And I forget if this is... What is this? Yeah, no, I was right, Chromatic Compound. So, this is where we start to get into interesting using the same mechanical crafters to do different things. You'll notice that you need 4 paintballs to make a chromatic compound, and you'll also notice that I've got 2 mechanical crafters connected to each other, and basically as long as you ensure that the slots are pointed at each other in such a way that they do not interact with each other, you can have separate recipes on the same mechanical crafter. Now the reason I did it over here was because I can save input issues by just connecting them all in the back using the wrench. So this will always just accept magenta paintballs unless I manually screw with it, which I don't intend to. But that is that. Then, oh man, we just missed a TNT explosion over there, over at the synchronized, or entangled singularities. That is unfortunate. I wish I'd gotten to see it. So, the next step after the chromatic compound is Radiant. Now, Radiant can be done one of two ways. I've elected to do it the easier way, which is to say that I have in fact, what was it, fought the Wither? I think that's what you need to get a beacon. But yes, we have a beacon down below. And that's what I was talking about with the Singularity. So there is, like, it takes too long for the chests to fill up to an adequate level before the second explosion happens. So we just have enough capacity for effectively 2. But then here, we're talking about this, the Radiance stuff. And you can either supply items that give off light, like torches, sea lanterns, jack-o'-lanterns potentially. You can pass them on a conveyor belt like next to the Radiant, whatever it's called, or the Chromatic Compound, and it will eventually absorb light, or you can just drop it through a beacon, and that will also instantly convert it. And the thing is, the beacon, like, doesn't require any additional factory setup. I just make it once, and as long as I just drop the compound through the beacon beam, I don't have to worry about producing any other goods or keeping on top of that factory stuff. And so in this limited space, it seemed like the better option. Now you'll also notice that I've got this redstone line up to the chute, and that's to prevent too much being released over time. What I realized is unintentionally happening is that this chest would potentially fill up, or maybe not, but the second it was like, this basically kept going, because I don't think I hooked the stockpile switch up over on this side, and actually I probably should have. That is the thing I could do if I really wanted to. But the thing is, this naturally functions as its own kind of stockpile switch, because when this is full, this will turn on, because the andesite funnel will stop accepting the item that's on this part of the belt. However, I needed 3 more content observers, or I needed, you know, all 4 of these content observers, because what would happen is if I just had one of them, the chute would drop multiple of the chromatic compounds, and I'd have a little bit of excess of the radiant stuff. And that basically became a problem where this would drop more than I could hold at a given time, and so I was just losing radiant compound and chromatic compound to nothing. It was the one flaw in my system, more or less. So just by having these content observers here, it ensures that as long as there is a radiant piece on the conveyor belt, this does not continue to drop stuff. It is really important that you have some kind of limiter here, or else you're going to get a lot of entities in your world, and you're also going to waste a lot of chromatic compound, and given the amount of stuff that it takes to get to this point, you don't want to be wasting that. So keep that in mind when you're building this. I don't know what other people have done to solve it. This is just my solution, which is kind of what we're here to cover. Then we make radiant sheet. This is just as simple as pounding it under a mechanical press. I don't think I really need to talk about that much, but I've split it up because we are once again doing mechanical crafter tricks. We've got this sort of horseshoe shape going on here, and that means that we've got them all connected on the backside, and we've got these mechanical covers in these 2 slots. So what that means is, this counts as one crafter for the purposes of putting items in. That makes it input easier. But also, we can be doing 3 of the same recipe at the same time and outputting to one conveyor belt from multiple sides. And theoretically, we could even do the 4th side if we really wanted to, but I don't need to. So, this is what makes Radiant Coil, I believe it's called. And so the Radiant Coil comes along into here, where once again we have a, you know, double chest splitter kind of setup here, and a stockpile switch for that. Now, we had to do some torch negation, if memory serves, because we effectively need this to do 2 different things. We need to be able to turn this off if we don't have enough radiant tubes, and we also need to turn the production on if we don't have enough radiant tubes. So that's why the negation comes into play here. And once again, because conveyor belts, they keep going whether or not, like, if you have an item in the deployer to be added as a part of a recipe, the item will pause underneath it and wait until it's processed. But if this were empty, I found out that you can get incomplete inductive mechanisms passing through, and then your conveyor belt gets all gummed up because it's at the wrong part of the process. But by doing this, or by limiting the output or whatever, whenever we are close to running low on these deployers, then we ensure that we don't accidentally get any of that kind of breakage. Now, we also have an unbreaking, what is this, magnet? It's like a resonator type thing. So we have this unbreaking resonator, and that is the last step in inductive mechanisms, and that brings us to the end of Chapter 3. This has been Chapter 3 of the Create Above and Beyond Starter Base Tour. Extra will release on Saturday, July 20th. My new series, A Vault a Day, will begin on Saturday, July 27th. If you're new to the channel, please consider liking, subscribing, and clicking that bell to be notified. As always, I'm looking forward to your feedback in the comments below. And with that, I will catch you on the flip side. Thanks for watching, everybody.